Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly terrifying account straight out of the coastal regions of the Sundarbans. We're going to be guided through this seriously dark narrative by the harrowing eyewitness testimony of a hardened local fisherman and sailor, a guy named Rafiq Ahmad. What we're about to explore here is a story that completely blurs the line between the brutal reality of survival and the chilling realm of the supernatural. It's a deep dive into an isolated community that gets pushed to the absolute brink. So let's just jump right in.
We begin our journey right here, with these exact, desperate words. "Leave me, I don't want this body, leave me." Just imagine it. It's the dead of winter, literally the coldest night of the Paush month. You've got this absolute pin-drop silence in an isolated village. And suddenly, it's completely shattered by these bone-chilling screams. These were the agonized cries of a man named Rahman. And well, this is our starting point. It's an incident that ultimately ends with a horrifying revelation about the sheer depths of human cruelty. Now, to truly grasp the sheer terror of this event, we have to look at the kinds of threats these resilient people normally face. They venture into the creeks for honey knowing there are tigers, and they wade into waters literally swarming with crocodiles just to catch crabs. They live side by side with death every single day, and honestly, they do it without batting an eye. But then you have this unseen danger, a supernatural entity. When a community that is virtually immune to the fear of man-eating predators is suddenly completely paralyzed by an invisible terror, the threat is way, way beyond human comprehension.
And to put that into perspective, just think about the number 1. That is the number of legs our narrator, Rafiq Ahmed, lost to a tiger attack. 1 whole leg. And yet, despite suffering such a horrific, life-altering injury, Rafiq never once considered fleeing his village. He stayed, he adapted, he just kept doing his grueling work. I think this brilliantly illustrates just how unimaginably horrific the coming threat must be. For a hardened survivor like Rafiq to finally say, "I'm out," and abandon his home, the horror had to completely eclipse the very real jaws of a tiger.
Which brings us to Rahman's terrifying demise, the inciting incident.
So on that freezing night, the absolute coldest of the year, the village's nightmare truly kicks off. Rafiq is suddenly jolted awake by his panicked daughter, who tells him their neighbor, Rahman, is gravely ill. Gripping his crutch, Rafiq rushes over, but what he finds are these suddenly violent, terrifying physical symptoms. Rahman is vomiting blood continuously. He's repeatedly smashing his head against the floor and the wall, literally until his forehead splits open. His eyes are turning completely lifeless and bloodless, taking on this cold blue tint, and he's foaming at the mouth. The sheer visceral shock of the scene leaves the entire village practically paralyzed at the doorway. And amidst all this violent, self-destructive thrashing, Rahman's screams begin to morph into these desperate, cryptic pleas. Right before collapsing and passing away, he screams, "Forgive me, daughter, forgive me," and he just repeats it over and over. Now, wait a second. This is an absolutely crucial point. Why on earth is he begging a daughter for forgiveness? This eerie apology right here is the primary clue to the sinister truth we're going to uncover a little later in this explainer. Meanwhile, outside the house, the village women are desperately trying to calm down Rahman's grieving wife, Jahan. Now keep in mind, Jahan had tragically just lost her own infant daughter, who was only a month and a half old, to a mysterious fever just a few days prior. So the women are trying to comfort her, saying Rahman just caught a bad sickness. But Jahan? She chillingly declares otherwise. She claims her husband was possessed by a Saravanashi jinn. For those who might not know, that's a highly destructive, unseen supernatural entity that's capable of violent possession and murder. And that takes us to the graveyard of horrors, where things escalate fast. You see, this curse doesn't just end with Rahman's burial. It escalates with terrifying speed. Because this isolated village completely lacks modern medical freezers or even immediate access to doctors for death certificates, keeping a body around means rapid decay. So Rahman is buried immediately, right there in the deep night. But by dawn, a 24-year-old man named Saidul, a guy famous throughout the whole region for his immense physical strength, falls victim to the exact same unseen force. And by morning, his possession takes a devastatingly public turn.
Much like Rahman, the physically imposing Saidul is reduced to this frantic, begging state. He starts talking to thin air, rubbing blood on his own face, and screaming, "Forgive me, you can't kill me, I made a mistake, just give me one chance." It's a horrifying contrast, really. You have this incredibly strong young man reduced to begging an invisible entity for his life, apologizing for some mysterious mistake. It goes to show that brute physical strength is utterly useless against this kind of plague. and the sheer brutality of what happens next is just unimaginable. Sayud literally breaks free from the villagers, grabs a spade, and sprints straight to the graveyard. First, he violently digs up the graves, tossing skeletons and half-rotted corpses aside like he's desperately searching for something. When he can't find it, he goes into a fit of absolute madness. He uses the spade to slice his own legs open, right down to the muscle. Then, he grabs his own exposed flesh in his fists, offers it up to an unseen woman in the air, screaming for her to eat it. And finally, he just drops dead, bleeding out, screaming that he has finally freed someone.
Now we reach the village plague, a community completely decimated.
Exactly 2 days later, what started as these isolated, targeted possessions rapidly transforms into an inescapable epidemic. An unexplained deadly fever sweeps through literally every family in the village. Doctors finally manage to arrive from the city, but they are entirely helpless. They can't cure it, they can't even diagnose it. And the tragedy strikes our narrator directly when Rafiq's own wife succumbs to the illness. But the absolute most terrifying detail is what happens at the very end. As the victims lay dying, they all echo the exact same chilling confession. That little girl didn't forgive me, so I am leaving my life.
So, the crucial point we really have to look at here is this striking pattern in their dying words. It forces us to step back and ask the ultimate question: what unforgivable sin had this village committed against a little girl? What was this terrible mistake they were all apologizing for right before the entity claimed their lives? This leads us to the sinister truth revealed, the very root of the horror. As Rafiq prepares to flee this cursed village forever, sneaking away in a small boat with his daughter under the cover of night, he encounters Rahman's widow, Jahan, sitting all alone at the riverbank. And it's here that she finally confesses the horrific truth. Jahan reveals a sequence of events that is just beyond horrifying. It turns out her infant daughter didn't actually die from that fever days earlier. She had simply fallen deeply unconscious. Wrongly assuming the baby had passed away, the parents didn't wait. They didn't check thoroughly. Instead, they rushed straight to the graveyard and buried her immediately. They had actually buried their own baby alive. But the true horror of this isn't just a tragic medical mistake. The genuinely dark reality here is that Jahan's husband, Raman, never wanted a daughter in the first place. The child was born completely against his wishes. So when the baby fell unconscious, rather than waiting to be absolutely sure she was gone, they saw an opportunity. Burying her prematurely was a conscious, incredibly apathetic choice to lessen what Raman viewed as a burden. Let that sink in for a second. And suddenly, all the puzzle pieces fall perfectly into place. The destructive jinn tearing the village apart wasn't some random monster from the woods. It was the vengeful spirit of that innocent, discarded infant taking her revenge. Rahman's violent hallucinations and his intense physical agony, that perfectly mirrored the unimaginable suffering of his daughter suffocating down in that grave. And the other men who suffered those violent possessions, like Saidu, they were the ones complicit in the culture that allowed that rushed, cruel burial to happen in the first place.
Deeply shaken by this dark revelation of human sin, Rafiq rows away into the absolute darkness of the river. He famously says, "I will live by begging somewhere else, but I won't stay in this village for a single second more." He willingly chooses an uncertain life of extreme poverty over staying in a community that's been cursed by its own horrifying apathy and patriarchal cruelty.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We're really left to ponder this provocative question. In a world where everyday survival against tigers and harsh nature is a brutal, constant battle, is the most terrifying monster the supernatural, vengeful spirit? Or is it the unspeakable human cruelty and convenience that created it? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating and honestly terrifying account with me. Think on that question, and I'll see you next time.